Hello everybody and welcome back to Spacedock. I'm Joanna and today we're having a closer look at gun turrets, all the stuff that makes them work and the considerations that go into their designs. First, I have to point out a common misconception. Turrets aren't just the spinny bit on the top, they also have inner workings that push below into the hull of the vehicle they're attached to, containing support equipment and crew that keep the gun working. On a tank, this section is called the turret basket, and on a ship, well, I'm not sure. They can be so much larger than what is on a tank, so the word basket doesn't seem appropriate. That size has the added benefit of improving weight distribution and stops the vehicle becoming too top heavy, which is especially important for ships in rolling seas. It's also a bit of a concern with ground vehicles that might be rolled, especially the taller wheeled APCs that are around these days. As for spaceships, well, they don't have the issue directly, but they do have to contend more with recoil since there's no ground or sea to counter it. Every shot fired is going to torque the ship, which will need an engine to counteract. Back to the turret baskets though, because they're important. And I lied before, not every turret has them. Remotely operated, smaller weapons can be entirely exterior to the vehicle due to their small size. This can also apply to larger weapons like the OTO Melara Sovra Ponte system, which literally means over deck. This is a 76mm gun, radar and ammunition entirely contained within the turret, making it very easy to install. Now, let's talk about the entire reason turrets are a thing, being able to move to point a gun. Rotating the turret on a ring or rollers or something else is called traverse, and almost always includes the entire structure of the turret as well as the gun itself. This means the traverse mechanism, whatever it may be, has to move the whole mass of the turret, both to get it going and to bring it to a halt. This mass can be an awful lot when getting up to full-size battleship main batteries, or the even bigger stuff that Sci-Fi has, so such guns are probably not going to be the fastest things in the world. This limits their effectiveness against small, fast-moving or very close targets, as the turrets are simply too slow to track them. Another consideration with the traverse mechanism is balance, as having a gun stick out of the front of a turret puts its mass on that side of the turret ring, making the mechanism work harder or potentially even getting it stuck. That mass needs to be counterbalanced with other equipment on the opposite side, or even just literal counterweights. If a tank's turret has extra equipment or armor added on, then that also needs to be balanced out. You may think this isn't relevant for spaceships in zero-G, but a lot of them work with artificial gravity or even thrust gravity. The last thing to think about for traverse is, does the turret need to fully rotate? If it can, then the mechanism and linkage for power and other things needs to be able to function without the turret needing to unwind. This also has consequences for ammunition replenishment. Sure, there's going to be storage in the turret itself, but there's only so much room for that, so ships in particular also have magazines outside of but close to the turret for extra ammunition. There's a difficulty here though, in that it can be dangerous or impossible to transfer ammunition to a turret while it's moving. I'm sure there is potential for better designed, smaller turrets to easily and safely be replenished mechanically through their traverse mechanism, so what I'm really saying here is that it's something that needs to be thought through. Though it may not even be relevant if a weapon system has really compact ammunition like a Macron gun or a particle beam would. Back to aiming, and pointing the weapon up and down is called elevation and depression, respectively, and for the most part, the only component that moves here is the gun itself, as well as the optics to aim it. This isn't always the case, as there is something called an oscillating turret, where the turret itself is split so that part of it moves up and down with the gun. This was done so that early gravity-fed autoloaders were always aligned to the gun breech. Though this extra mass makes elevating and stabilizing the gun harder, and armoring the turret much more challenging, so this design fell out of favor. Compared to surface combatants, elevation is significantly more important for a space weapon because space combat is inherently three-dimensional. To be effective, pretty much every space weapon will need as much freedom to point upward as anti-air weapons do on the surface. There is a problem here though, a rotational dead zone. If a weapon tracks a target that goes directly overhead, even if it can point straight up, it will need to instantly traverse 180 degrees in order to keep following the target past the zenith. This can sort of be solved by having elevation that goes beyond 90 degrees, but really something going directly through the zenith of a turret is going to be such a rare occurrence that I don't know if it's really a concern. As for gun depression, it's still important for guns to be able to point down, as it simply provides a larger field of fire for that particular weapon. This means the ship needs to rotate less to get guns on target, and allows more guns to get on the target as well. Which brings us to fields of fire, because the layout of where the turrets are on a ship determines their true effectiveness. For a point defense armament, you probably want to have total spherical coverage of every angle, which is accomplished through a network of many small, fast turrets. For a ship's primary offensive armament, it depends more on other factors. Big turrets for big guns take up a lot of space and are the defining feature of a gun-based warship. So there's likely to be some compromises made to layout due to balance, armoring, or other factors. While it may be desirable to have every main gun to be able to point in every direction, it probably isn't going to be possible, as we can see with the armament of battleships and such. And that's just aiming in a circle. Trying to do this for a sphere is even harder. There are other out-of-universe reasons to not have full coverage as well. Perhaps it just doesn't fit the vibe the setting is going for, or it would break the visual language of the ship, or it's a game and there's gameplay choices made for balance. With all that said and done, let's look at some special cases and alternative options. What about sticking guns on an arm? Depending on the arm itself, this can mean more freedom of movement over a turret due to the extra joints an arm has, so you can get around some of those rotation lock issues, but most of the time the extra complexity versus a turret just isn't worth it. But they are cool, like the gun arms on the Cyclones in Borderlands 3, which also run on a track in the wheel rim so the arms can look over the wheel itself. Now, lasers, which don't need the actual laser generating equipment to be in or even near a turret. Since the laser is a tiny little beam, it can be bounced around with mirrors through the ship to the turret, which is really just the final focusing and pointing element of the weapon. It just needs to be a set of focusing mirrors and or lenses with a clever arrangement to pipe the beam through, so it can be very lightweight and speedy. This also means you can run multiple turrets from just one laser generator, switching the beam between them. While the beam is firing through one turret, the others can move to track new targets before it's their turn to fire, giving constant uptime with one weapon against multiple targets. The other cool things lasers can do is point while having no turret at all, using phased array technology. So yeah, those awesome phaser strips in Star Trek have a kinda real-world analog, which uses the same physical principle behind modern radars, but applied to the laser wavelengths of light. I've previously covered phased array lasers in more detail in another video, so go check that one out for more info if those intrigue you. Turrets are a ubiquitous part of pretty much any weapon system, even missiles, because, well, being able to aim is a pretty good perk. But there are considerations that need to be taken into account depending on the exact weapon being mounted, how much of the vehicle is used for the turret, where the turret is placed, and how all of that meshes with the other systems and weapons the vehicle has. But it's all worth it, whether the turrets are the secondary armament of a vessel or its defining feature. You can support Spacedock by joining our Patreon, where you can get our frigate and spacefighter design reference books. Alternatively, you can support us directly through YouTube by becoming a channel member. Thanks to our supporters, and thank you for watching.